Rusty and Gleam slipped into the shadows behind a half-burned wagon, their movements muted by silencing spells. The faint light of the torches flickered over the ruined camp, making the corpses seem to twitch in the shifting glow. His metallic body shifted into its all-purpose form, and he lowered his halberd to keep it hidden from sight. When the strangers drew near, he activated his skill to merge with the shadows and kept it running at a low output to conserve mana. This was something he could now do after the skill had leveled up. Although he had gained new abilities during this shadowy siege, he had not yet found the time to review them. "We need to stay quiet," Rusty whispered. "They're not bandits and don't look like they are from the settlement either." The footsteps grew louder. Cloaked figures emerged from the darkness, moving with eerie silence. There were 5 of them, each wearing a long crimson robe that shimmered faintly with pulsing enchantments beneath the fabric. They spread out through the camp, examining the bandits that Rusty had already slain. None of them spoke. They moved slowly, as if studying the scene to understand what had happened. Rusty remained motionless, watching them closely. Their appearance reminded him of a group he had encountered in another city, followers of a strange cult. That was where he had first seen a powerful blood mage, and where his body had come into their possession for a time. "It's that strange cult. What are they doing here?" Alexander sounded surprised to see them. One of the figures bore an ornate scythe tattoo bearing a crescent moon, which made their affiliation unmistakable. "They could have followed us. We disrupted their plans. I would have done the same. A ruler cannot let lesser beings think they can get away with their crimes. An example has to be made so that it won't happen again." A burden replied in a menacing tone. Rusty frowned at the thought. If they had tracked him here, could they also find their way to his smithy? He had people living there now, people he actually cared about. If his lair was attacked while he was away, it would be disastrous and might even draw the attention of the humanoids there. He at least knew that any involvement with the occult was frowned upon. "Gleam, circle around, and get ready to attack." He made up his mind. It was better not to leave things up to chance. The force was small, and stopping it now would be best. "Just try not to kill all of them this time, Rusty. It would be better if we knew how they managed to track us all the way here." A burden said as Gleam moved off and began circling the camp at a slow pace. It was true. If Rusty killed everyone without learning how they had reached them, the consequences could be disastrous. Others might arrive later when this group failed to return with a report. He needed to understand how they were tracking him and find a way to stop it. It's been a while since that incident. If they are tracking us, then either this mission is not very important or their method is weak. Alexander said as they watched the cloaked figures gather around the bandit leader. Finally, the strangers began to speak. "This does not look like the work of a human. A monster must have been involved. It might have been that being, and it's not alone." The one who spoke wore a robe that differed slightly from the others. He looked thin and wiry, and beneath his robe, he wore a kind of light armor. 2 daggers hung at his sides, his primary weapons. "We need to make sure. This one died recently, the ritual can be used." The group of 5 surrounded the dead bandit leader who had just fallen. The wiry man who seemed to be their leader drew one of his daggers and cut his finger. Blood began to drip quickly into the dead bandit's open tiger-like mouth. The other 4 cultists stretched out their hands and began chanting in a strange language that he did not understand. "This is my chance. I should get closer." These cultists were strange and dangerous, but Rusty edged forward, hidden in his partial shadow form. His armor plates shifted silently under the effect of his silencing spell. His metallic frame caught no light as he crept closer, and soon he could see the strange ritual taking form. The air grew heavy with the smell of iron and fresh blood. The bandit leader's corpse twitched once, then again, before jerking violently. It stopped suddenly, and his head tilted back at an unnatural angle as his jaw cracked wide open. "Rise and speak. Who or what did this to you?" The wiry cultist's voice was sharp and cold. His blood now formed thin crimson threads that connected with the corpse, somehow forcing it to move. The bandit's one good eye snapped open. It was cloudy and red, but it turned toward the cultist who had commanded him. "Monsters." The voice was flat and lifeless, but it answered. "What kind of monsters?" The cultist's tone demanded more. The corpse spoke slowly, its words dragging out. "Metal, and silver insect." The bandit's mangled voice croaked the words. His head jerked violently, and his jaw opened even wider than it should have, the joints cracking wetly. His eye rolled back as the spell began to harm him. "Leader, the spell is breaking. I know. Keep it steady. We need more information. Metal, armor, glowing, eyes, unnatural. The cultist nodded as if the words confirmed what he was searching for. Then, just as he prepared to release the spell, he froze. We are not alone. He spoke and moved in the same instant, bending backward as a large halberd flew past him. Lightning crackled along the weapon's edge, grazing his cloak and burning part of it before he threw it aside. One of his followers was not as lucky. The weapon struck the man's head and hurled him into a pile of debris. Before the others could react, a burst of radiant energy descended from above. Rays of shifting color struck several cultists, searing through their defenses and leaving deep wounds. Disperse! Rusty emerged from the shadows, targeting one of the three cultists still standing. In his hand was the same axe the bandit leader had once used against him, and now he hurled it toward another wounded cultist. The axe spun through the air and buried itself deep in the cultist's chest. The man gasped, blood spraying from his mouth as he dropped to his knees. Gleam flashed across the side like a streak of silver light, her wings cutting through the air as she unleashed bursts of glowing projectiles that struck down the man already wounded by the axe. 5 men had stood before them at the start, but now only 3 remained, and just one was still uninjured. I'll leave those 2 to you, Gleam. I'll handle their leader. Rusty stepped into the torchlight and charged at the man armed with twin daggers. The man wore a strange suit of armor made from mismatched pieces of leather and chain mail. His daggers were bent and jagged, yet still sharp and deadly. He flipped through the air to gather himself, which gave Rusty enough time to grab his halberd again and give chase. Then the real battle started. The cultist moved like a shadow, faster than Rusty expected. His blades flashed in and out of sight, each strike aimed at a weak point in Rusty's armor. Sparks flew as metal met metal. Rusty swung his halberd in a wide arc, but the cultist ducked under it and slashed upward, cutting across Rusty's chest plate. The blow left a shallow indentation, but the speed behind it made him step back. This one is fast, and deadly. Rusty adjusted his stance as he faced his new opponent. While the force behind the enemy's attacks was not as great, the cutting power was tremendous. If Rusty had been made of flesh, that strike would have torn his chest apart. Even with his armored body, the small daggers were quickly carving gashes across his frame, while he could barely land a clean hit in return. Strong monster, but strength means nothing if you can't land a hit. The cultist smiled, his eyes glowing faintly red. Before Rusty could respond, the man vanished, leaving only a blur of motion. Rusty spun just in time to block another strike aimed at his neck. The impact sent a violent jolt through his metal arms, and the sound of clashing steel echoed across the ruined camp. The cultist moved like liquid, his attacks fluid and unpredictable. Each strike came from a different angle, mixing slashes, stabs, and feints. Rusty's halberd was powerful but slower, and every missed swing cost him another wound. Even though he could regenerate his metal body, his supply of SP would eventually run dry, and then he would lose. This was a first for him, an enemy he could not fully track or predict. Yet he did not panic. There was still a way to win. During the battle at the bandit camp, he had leveled up several times and gained a new skill. Now was the perfect time to use it, as it served as the ideal counter for someone with such incredible reaction speed. As the skill was activated, time seemed to freeze. The world turned grey and still. The cultist's last movement hung in the air, his daggers suspended above Rusty's helmet like a falling guillotine. Even the flames of the burning campfire flickered slowly. Rusty was not controlling time, but his perception had expanded. His speed remained the same, yet now he could see clearly and react with precision. He dropped his halberd and drew 2 short swords, closing the distance for close combat. With his senses sharpened, he activated every buffing skill he possessed and met the cultist on equal terms. Their blades clashed again and again. Sparks burst with every hit, and Rusty managed to cut the man's arms and legs, forcing him to retreat. How did it get so much faster? The cultist shouted in disbelief and activated his own skill, his veins bulged as his muscles swelled with unnatural strength. Despite the surge in power and speed, Rusty kept up with him, his own skills amplifying his movements. The two fought relentlessly, their bodies covered in cuts and punctures, but one of them was clearly fading faster than the other. Impossible, how could I? Arg! With a powerful thrust, Rusty drove one short sword into the man's thigh and the other into his shoulder. He pressed down, pinning the cultist to the ground before he could escape. The man's daggers were still buried in Rusty's metallic frame, but as long as his core remained intact, he would not fall. The cultist thrashed beneath him, eyes burning crimson as blood spilled from his wounds. Rusty's grip tightened on the hilts of his blades, keeping the man pinned to the ground. He even used his body to restrain him as he wasn't quite done with him. Killing him would be easy, but what he really needed was information. Dirty creature. Rusty did not reply because he had no head within his body to produce sound. Once the man took his position, his companion appeared behind him. Did you take care of those two? Good. This one has to live. Keep watch while I get some information. Although a burden mentioned torture, Rusty knew he did not have time for that. Instead, he decided to use his possession skill to uncover what was happening by searching through the man's memories. He had become accustomed to using this ability to gather information, and once he was finished, he might even absorb one of the cultist's skills. What are you? Before the man could finish, Rusty's helmet settled onto his head and the possession skill activated. The man's consciousness resisted with all its strength, but Rusty eventually overpowered him. Images flashed through Rusty's mind, showing the cultists wandering through spider-infested forests as they tracked him to the place where he had evolved. After his evolution, they had lost his trail and spent weeks searching for clues. As Rusty continued to explore the man's memories, something unexpected occurred. A force began to pull at his very being, and before he could react, he was drawn into a strange place. What is this? Before him stretched a crimson lake, not of water but of blood. He stood in it, half of his metal body submerged. Rusty struggled to keep his balance as the thick, sticky liquid lapped at his metallic frame. Something was watching him. Something unseen, something powerful. He tried to scan the area with his skills to locate the source of the gaze, but there were no life signals. It wasn't a normal presence. It didn't feel physical, yet it pressed on him with a weight that made him uncomfortable. Every instinct screamed to get out. Rusty took a slow step back, the blood clinging to his legs like heavy chains. He turned his head, trying to see. But the crimson lake stretched forever. No sky above. No ground beneath. Just red. And that feeling of eyes being on him. Watching. Waiting. Who's there? His voice echoed through the vast expanse, but nothing answered. Instead, the lake began to move. A ripple spread out from nowhere. The blood rose higher around his body, reaching his chest, then his neck. It slid over his helmet and began seeping into him through every crevice. Even when he tried to push it back, it clung to him like tar. Soon his entire body was submerged in the bloody lake, and he felt himself sinking into the depths. At first, there was no sound, only the crimson void surrounding him, but eventually he heard something. A faint, repeating echo, like a heartbeat. He looked down toward the source and saw it, a strange organ resembling a human heart, only many times larger, as massive as a mountain. What? Hey? I was just... Suddenly, the entire world blurred, and he awoke to find Gleam poking him with her antennae in concern. To make matters worse, he felt damp and realized that the cultist's head he had been inhabiting had turned to paste. The possession skill must have formed a connection with the god of blood. Quite fascinating. A wisp of black light drifted around Rusty as he picked himself up. The 5 cult members who had followed them and the bandits were defeated, but the vision still troubled him. Worse, he could not absorb any of the enemy's skills. It is not fascinating at all. Rusty said this as he dragged a cultist's body and laid it with the others. These people had trailed him and could make corpses speak, so he planned to burn them all. It is okay, Gleam. I can carry them myself, but I will need you to cast a fire spell on them after I finish. Rusty placed the last cultist among the others and stepped back. The pile before them contained not only the cultists but also most of the bandits he had stripped, including their leader. His guides had advised him that burning everyone together would draw less suspicion than targeting only the cultists. It was a tedious task, but after about an hour he finally gathered them all. Good. Now don't forget the flammable oil, the wood will do the rest. Alexander's white light brightened the area slightly as he spoke out. I know. Rusty found a barrel filled with oil that had been used for the torches and poured it over the pile of dead bodies. Once everything was ready, it was Gleam's turn to act. She stepped closer and prepared a sparkling spell. Lifting her head high, she exhaled a wide burst of fire that struck the pile and instantly ignited it. I'm glad I can't smell this. The flames consumed the pile of corpses with a sharp hiss. The fire spread quickly and grew into a roaring inferno. Gleam reduced the strength of her flames once the wood and other materials Rusty had added began to burn on their own. Soon, a massive blaze filled the center of the bandit camp, consuming everything and everyone that had been part of it. Although many lives had ended that day, Rusty found himself thinking that the fire looked beautiful. The flames danced and shimmered as the first light of dawn touched the horizon. While he watched the fire, he also took a moment to examine the new skill he had gained during the mission. Hyper-Awareness L1. Active skill. When activated, perception sharpens and the world appears to move more slowly than it truly does. There was also a second skill connected to his puppet armors. Puppet Armor Vision L1. Active skill. When this skill is active, the user shares vision with the selected puppet armor. The skill has a limited range and drains mana at a constant rate. The next skill was interesting, although he was not sure how useful it would be. The main issue was that he rarely used his puppet armor ability. It consumed too much of his precious mana, and the puppets he created were not very strong. He could usually defeat monsters on his own much faster. Still, if he ever learned to control a large number of puppets, they could become a real advantage. His eyes were different from other people's, and in theory, he could use his puppets to see the blind spots of others as well as his own. It might even be possible to position a puppet behind him to watch his back and warn him of any approaching ambushes. These were the only two new skills he had received, and his level was now above 20. He would reach the next threshold soon, but the system was not offering him much in terms of power. He was not sure if that was entirely a bad thing, since he often neglected some of his existing skills anyway. We should not waste time here. Free the prisoners, Rusty, and let us retreat for now. I am sure someone will come once they notice the smoke. Alexander called out to him as he looked through his skills. Rusty turned from the flames and glanced toward the darker edge of the camp where the prisoners had been kept. The main problem was the wooden cabin where the bandit leader had stayed, which stood close to the burning pile of corpses. There was someone inside, so he needed to get them out first. I should probably disguise myself first and Gleam, hide for now. After activating his loadouts, he changed into a set of armor commonly worn by adventurers and wanderers. He covered it with a plain black robe and made his way toward the bandit leader's home. With a strong kick, he sent the door flying open. Inside, he saw a naked woman trembling and crying on the bed. Her arms and legs were bound, and her wrists were bloody, showing that she had desperately tried to escape. What? Who are you? What is happening? Please, no. This woman seems terrified. We need to set her free. Alexander remarked as Rusty stepped inside. Rusty did not free her right away. Instead, he looked around the cabin, which was cluttered with empty ale tankards. The bandit leader had spoken of a treasure and claimed to have hidden it somewhere, but his guides believed he was lying. She can wait. We should find the treasure first. I am sure that greedy bandit hid it here, said Aberton as he urged Rusty to search the area. His reasoning made sense. The cabin was accessible only to the leader and no one else. It would be more logical to keep his valuables here than to bury them somewhere in the forest where other bandits might find them. The leader was probably never alone except when he was here, which could only mean one thing. Oh! As Rusty searched the cabin, turning everything upside down and making the woman even more anxious, he noticed something unusual. There was an object beneath the bed that looked out of place. No, please! The woman screamed in horror as Rusty pushed the bed onto its side. The ropes that bound her kept her in place, leaving her hanging awkwardly. Rusty, however, was focused on what appeared to be a false section of the floor. He moved closer and removed a loose plank, revealing a hidden chest beneath it. This must be it. The chest was locked, but with his iron grip, he tore the lock off. Inside he found coins, gems, and colorful trinkets that had likely been stolen from various merchants. He could not tell the total value, but it was clear there was enough wealth to cover any future fees he would be forced to pay for years to come. See, I told you. Aberton said proudly, and Rusty responded with a resounding nod. Now then. He closed the chest and stored it away. When an item was contained and within a certain size limit, it took up less space inside his storage. Once everything was secured, he lowered the bed back into place. The woman looked as if she might faint. Her eyes widened in terror as he pulled out a dagger. No. There was nothing he could do about her fear, but she soon realized he meant no harm. He used the dagger quickly to cut through her bindings. She was free now, though still trembling. He helped people when he could, yet he did not see their safety as his responsibility. Once she was unbound, he left the cabin in silence and headed toward the area where the other prisoners were kept. Smoke was beginning to fill the air, and the fire was spreading fast, so he did not have much time. Moving more quickly, he reached the main prison and struck the first lock aside. When he stepped inside, he looked over the captives. The stronger barbarians were kept in cages, while the weaker humanoids were tied to the walls or to each other. "Who are you? You're not one of the bandits?" Someone dressed in a tunic and resembling a merchant asked, but he did not answer. Instead, he tossed a bundle of keys into one of the cages that held the barbarians. The bandit guard had been carrying them, and with those keys, the prisoners could free themselves. Then he used his dagger to cut one of the merchants loose and left the tool with him before walking away. "Wait, who are you? Why are you helping us?" This time, one of the women shouted. At first, the captives had been wary of him, but now they seemed more curious about who he was. Rusty did not have Edmund's head with him, so he could not explain. He only glanced back at the speaker for a moment before turning away and leaving them to wonder. Soon after, he rejoined Gleam, returned to his other, smaller form, and together they rose into the sky. They seemed to be working together. For a moment, Rusty and Gleam hovered in the air, watching the bandit camp burn from the fire they had started. Surprisingly, the prisoners he had helped escape were working together for once. The barbarians, who were usually treated as slaves, were helping the others, and even the woman he had cut free from the bandit leader's cabin was now embracing a few of the other survivors. It was a strange sight to see. These people, as far as Rusty knew, came from different sides. Some were barbarians, others were merchants, and there were a few who belonged to neither group. Yet, at this moment, all of them were united in their effort to escape. No one fled alone, and the stronger barbarians were even carrying the injured to safety. They are lucky those bandits did not take all the wagons, and some horses are still left. Rusty thought as he lingered for a moment longer. The sun was beginning to rise, marking the start of a new day. The prisoners eventually found their way to the wagon and the horses, but the barbarians ran away into the forest instead of staying. Finally it's done. This marked the end of his short expedition into the bandit camp. He had collected a great deal of treasure, all safely stored inside his spatial space. Even if some evidence led back to him, no one would ever find what he had taken. It would be as if everything had simply disappeared. Still, there was one thing he wanted to see before leaving, so he decided to stay a little longer. "Gleam, can you take me to one of those trees? I want to try something." A few moments later, they found themselves on top of a tree near the bandit camp. He had come up with a new way to test his latest skill. To begin, he took out a simple-looking helmet from his spatial space, one that had belonged to one of the bandits. He positioned it so it faced the burning camp and then activated his puppet armor skill. Although the skill was designed to control full suits of armor, it could also target specific parts, such as a helmet. It looked completely ordinary, but he could tell the skill had taken effect. Once it was ready, he moved to the other side of the tree and used his newest ability, the one that allowed him to see what his puppet armor could see. Even though he was only controlling a helmet this time, the sensation that followed felt strange and vivid. "Oh! I can see the bandit camp." "Yes, I can see through the helmet, Gleam. It's hard to describe, but it works." Rusty spoke while trying to handle the double vision he was experiencing. At first, it felt as though what he was seeing was overlapping, but eventually he began to distinguish between the two sides. It was as if he had multiple eyes and vantage points, allowing him to clearly see the flaming camp in the distance, along with the wagon and the people fleeing from it. Now, what about the distance? With everything working as intended, there was one thing left to test. He jumped back onto Gleam's back, and she carried him away. At first, he could see through the other helmet's viewpoint without issue, but after about 50 meters, it became harder to see. The limit seemed to be 100 meters before everything went dark. "That's about it, hey? It should still be helpful." Next, he performed a few more tests, such as placing several helmets around to see if he could switch between their viewpoints. He quickly realized that this skill, at least for now, was limited to one puppet armor at a time. However, once two armors were active, he could switch between them at will and with surprising speed. With this in mind, he could see this ability being useful in battle, though he would need to perform more tests. "Leaving? Not yet, Gleam. For now, we will wait here. I want to see who really worked with these bandits. While Rusty had a general idea of who he was up against, he still wondered who would arrive at the burning camp first. If it were the nobility or members of the merchant guild, he considered whether he should attack them again. He was still a few levels short of reaching his next evolutionary stage, and whoever arrived would likely be a future enemy. After placing one of the helmets at a good vantage point, he began to wait. Around half a day later, much sooner than he had expected, someone finally arrived. The sound of loud hooves clearly meant mounted riders were approaching fast. Rusty used his puppet armor to watch the dust rising in the distance. The first silhouettes appeared as a line of riders cutting across the horizon. They moved in a tight formation, and it was clear they were not adventurers. Their black armor gleamed faintly under the noon sun, each chest plate marked with an insignia he recognized. The Black Hounds. It was the mercenary group from whom he had wrestled the children away. He had somewhat expected them to arrive, but the idea of attacking them now was not a good one. Their leader was clearly visible at the front, already prepared for battle. Their numbers were also greater than he had anticipated, around 40 mounted men. It was not a force he could handle alone, but even so, he was curious about their intentions. From his vantage point, using the helmet puppet as his watch point, he felt no fear. There was also a chance that after they were done here, a few sentries would remain behind and then he would strike.